The stone hit Victoria Zimmerman's window at dawn, shattering glass across her bedroom floor, and she knew her life in Calico, California was over. She had awakened to whispers 3 days earlier, noticed how the women at the general store stopped talking when she entered, saw how mothers pulled their daughters away when she walked past. The rumors had started small, like they always did in mining towns during the summer of 1885, but they had grown into something monstrous. Someone had seen her coming out of the assay office late at night with Thomas Hendricks, the married mine supervisor. Someone else claimed she had been meeting him regularly, that she was the reason his wife looked so pale and sad these days. None of it was true. Victoria had been delivering accounts for her father's freight business, nothing more, but truth had no place in a town that had already made up its mind. The second stone followed the first, this one hitting the side of her house with a dull thud. Victoria pressed herself against the wall, her heart hammering in her chest. She could hear voices outside, angry and accusatory, though she could not make out the words. Her father had left 2 weeks ago to oversee a delivery route to Sacramento and was not expected back for another week. She was alone. "Homewrecker!" Someone shouted, and Victoria flinched. She recognized the voice. It belonged to Martha Crowley, who had always smiled at her before, who had complimented her dress just last month at church. Another voice joined in, then another. Victoria grabbed her robe and wrapped it around herself with shaking hands. She needed to think, needed to figure out what to do, but fear was making it hard to breathe. She had lived in Calico her entire 21 years. This was her home. These were her neighbors. How had everything changed so quickly? The answer, she knew, was that towns like Calico were powder kegs waiting to explode. The silver mines had been producing less this year, and people were scared. Scared people needed someone to blame, needed an outlet for their frustration and anger. Victoria had simply been convenient. She heard footsteps on her porch, heavy and deliberate. Someone was trying the door handle. Victoria backed away, looking around frantically for something she could use to defend herself. Her father's rifle was in the study, but she would have to cross the main room to get to it, and she could see shadows moving past the windows. "We know you are in there," another woman called out. "Decent folk do not want your kind around here anymore." Victoria felt tears burning in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She had done nothing wrong. Nothing. But she knew that would not matter. She had seen what happened to women who were labeled as improper or immoral in frontier towns. They were driven out, or worse. She thought of Sarah Martindale, who had been accused of similar things 2 years ago in a neighboring town. Sarah had been found dead in the desert 3 days after leaving, and no one had been held accountable. The pounding on the door grew louder, more insistent. Victoria grabbed her everyday dress and pulled it on over her nightgown, her fingers fumbling with the buttons. She needed to get out, but how? The front door was obviously not an option, and if she went out the back, they would see her, unless she could create a distraction. She ran to her bedroom and grabbed the small leather bag she used for traveling. Into it, she shoved a change of clothes, her mother's silver locket, the money she had been saving from helping with the freight accounts. It was not much, maybe $30, but it would have to be enough. Her hands were still shaking as she tied the bag closed. The sound of breaking wood made her jump. They were coming through the door. Victoria ran to the back of the house, to the small window that overlooked the narrow alley between her house and the abandoned blacksmith shop. She pushed it open and squeezed through, scraping her arm on the rough wood frame. The pain barely registered. She could hear them inside now, their voices echoing through the rooms. She went out the back. "Get her," Victoria ran. Her boots were still inside, and the rocky ground tore at her feet through her thin stockings, but she did not stop. She cut through the alley and emerged onto a side street, then sprinted toward the edge of town. The desert stretched out before her, vast and unforgiving in the early morning light. She had no horse, no supplies, no plan. She just ran. The sun was climbing higher now, and the air was already hot. Victoria's lungs burned as she pushed herself forward, not daring to look back. She could hear shouting behind her, but it seemed to be getting fainter. Or maybe that was just wishful thinking. The desert terrain was rough, covered in scrub brush and sharp rocks. Her feet were bleeding, leaving small red marks on the pale dirt, but she could not stop. She had been running for perhaps 20 minutes when she heard the sound of hoofbeats. Her heart sank. They had gotten horses. She would never outrun them now. Victoria pushed herself harder, but her legs were already weak from exertion and fear. The hoofbeats grew louder, closer. She could hear the horse breathing, could almost feel its presence behind her. "Easy there," a man's voice said, low and calm. "Easy now." Victoria stumbled and nearly fell. Strong hands caught her arms, steadying her. She looked up, expecting to see one of the townsmen, expecting the worst. Instead, she found herself staring into a pair of surprisingly gentle brown eyes set in a tanned, weathered face. The man was perhaps 25 or 26, with dark hair that fell past his collar and a few days' worth of stubble on his jaw. He was dressed like a working cowboy in worn denim and a faded blue shirt with a dusty hat pushed back on his head. "They are after me," Victoria gasped out. "I have to keep going." "I know," the man said. "I saw what happened, saw them at your house." He glanced back toward town, his expression hardening. "That was not right, what they were doing." "Please," Victoria said. "I did not do what they are saying. I did not." "I believe you," he said simply, and something in his tone made her think he actually meant it. "Name is Benjamin Rourke. I work the cattle ranch about 15 miles north of here." He gestured to his horse, a sturdy-looking bay mare. "You need to get out of here, and you cannot do it on foot. Come on." Victoria hesitated for only a moment. She could hear voices in the distance, could see a small group of riders leaving town. Benjamin followed her gaze and swore under his breath. "Now would be good," he said. He helped her up onto the horse, then swung up behind her in one smooth motion. The mare danced sideways, responding to the urgency in his movements, and then they were flying across the desert. Benjamin guided the horse with practiced ease, navigating between rocks and bushes that Victoria would not have seen until she crashed into them. He kept one arm loosely around her waist, steadying her, and she found herself leaning back against him, grateful for the solid warmth of another human being who did not want to hurt her. They rode hard for what felt like hours. The sun climbed higher, beating down mercilessly. Victoria's throat was parched and her head was beginning to ache. She wondered vaguely if she was going to pass out, but Benjamin's arm tightened around her as if he sensed her wavering. "Not much farther," he said. "There is a place I know. You will be safe there." Victoria wanted to ask where, wanted to ask why he was helping her, wanted to ask 100 questions. But forming words seemed too difficult, so she just nodded and concentrated on staying upright. The landscape began to change gradually. The flat desert gave way to rolling hills, and scrub brush became more plentiful. Victoria could see mountains in the distance, their peaks still touched with snow despite the summer heat. Benjamin guided the horse toward a narrow canyon, barely visible unless you knew where to look. "Are they still following us?" Victoria managed to ask. Benjamin glanced back. "They turned back about an hour ago. I think they figured you would not make it out here alone anyway." His voice was tight with controlled anger. "Bastards." The canyon walls rose up around them, providing blessed shade. The temperature dropped noticeably, and Victoria shivered despite the heat she could still feel radiating from her sun-exposed skin. Benjamin noticed and shifted slightly, blocking the cooler air from hitting her directly. "Almost there," he said. The canyon opened up into a small, hidden valley. There was a spring here. Victoria could see the green vegetation clustered around it, and a small cabin tucked against the canyon wall. It looked old but well-maintained, with a covered porch and a small corral. "This is my place," Benjamin said as he reined in the horse. "Well, one of them. I use it when I am working the cattle in this area. Nobody knows about it except my boss and me." He dismounted and then helped Victoria down. Her legs nearly buckled when her feet touched the ground, and he caught her again, his hands firm on her shoulders. "Take it easy," he said. "You have been through hell this morning." Victoria looked up at him, really looked at him for the first time. He had a kind face, she realized, with laugh lines around his eyes and a mouth that looked more accustomed to smiling than frowning. There was something solid about him, something trustworthy. She did not know why she felt that way about a complete stranger, but she did. "Why are you helping me?" she asked. Benjamin was quiet for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "Because it was the right thing to do," he said finally. "And because I know what it is like to be accused of something you did not do, to have everyone turn on you without hearing your side." He guided her toward the cabin. "Come on. Let me get you some water and tend to those feet." Inside, the cabin was simple but clean. There was a small stove, a table with 2 chairs, a narrow bed in one corner. Benjamin pulled out one of the chairs and gestured for Victoria to sit. She sank into it gratefully while he found a canteen and poured water into a tin cup. "Slow sips," he instructed. "You are probably dehydrated." The water was the most wonderful thing Victoria had ever tasted. She wanted to gulp it down, but she followed his advice and drank slowly. Benjamin knelt in front of her and gently lifted one of her feet, examining the cuts and scrapes. "This is going to hurt," he warned, and then he began carefully cleaning the wounds. Victoria bit her lip to keep from crying out, but tears leaked from the corners of her eyes anyway. Benjamin worked with surprising gentleness for someone with such large, calloused hands. When he finished with the first foot, he moved to the second, his movements methodical and careful. "I am sorry," Victoria said quietly. Benjamin looked up at her, puzzled. "For what? For this?" "For the trouble. You did not ask to be involved in my problems." "You did not ask for those problems to begin with," Benjamin replied, "and I chose to help. That is on me, not you." He finished bandaging her feet and stood. "You hungry? I have got some supplies here." "Nothing fancy, but it will fill your stomach." Victoria realized she was starving. She had not eaten since dinner the previous evening, and her body was demanding fuel. "Yes, please." Benjamin moved around the small kitchen area with easy efficiency, building a fire in the stove and setting a pot to boil. He pulled out dried beef, beans, and some slightly stale bread, assembling a simple but hearty meal. As he worked, Victoria found herself studying him. He moved with the unconscious grace of someone completely comfortable in his own skin, someone who knew exactly who he was and what he was about. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Sure." "Earlier, you said you knew what it was like to be accused of something you did not do. What happened?" Benjamin's hands stilled for a moment, then resumed their work. "I used to work on a ranch in Nevada," he said. "About 3 years ago. There was a fire in the main barn, killed about a dozen horses. Someone said they saw me near the barn right before it started. I had been there, checking on a mare that was due to foal, but I had nothing to do with the fire." He stirred the beans, his expression distant. "Did not matter. The owner believed what he wanted to believe, and so did everyone else. I got run out of there with nothing but the clothes on my back and my horse." "I am sorry," Victoria said, and meant it. "Turned out all right in the end," Benjamin said. "Found work here in California with a man who actually listens before he judges. But I remember what it felt like, having everyone look at you like you were something dirty." He glanced at her. "So when I saw what was happening to you this morning, I could not just ride past." They ate in comfortable silence. The food was simple but good, and Victoria felt strength returning to her body with each bite. Benjamin poured her more water and made sure she drank it all. "So what is your plan?" he asked when they had finished eating. "My plan," Victoria laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I do not have a plan. I do not have anything. Everything I own is back in that house and I cannot go back there." "Your father," Benjamin said. "You mentioned he is in Sacramento. He left 2 weeks ago on business. He is not due back for another week." Victoria felt fresh tears threatening. "He is going to come home and find his house torn apart and his daughter gone." "We will get word to him," Benjamin said firmly. "Let him know you are safe. But right now you need to rest. You are exhausted and those feet need time to heal." "I cannot stay here," Victoria protested. "This is your place and I have already imposed enough." "You are not imposing," Benjamin said. "And yes, you can stay here, at least for a few days until we figure out what to do next." He stood and grabbed a blanket from a shelf. "You take the bed, I will sleep outside under the porch." "I cannot take your bed," Victoria said. "You can and you will," Benjamin replied, and there was steel under the kindness in his voice. "You have been through hell today, Victoria. Let someone take care of you for once." Hearing him use her name sent a strange flutter through her chest. She realized she had not told him her name. "How do you know what I am called?" "I asked around town yesterday, after I saw you at the general store," Benjamin admitted, a slight flush coloring his tan cheeks. "I thought you were pretty, and I was working up the courage to introduce myself proper-like." He looked away. "Then this morning happened, and here we are." Victoria did not know what to say to that. In the midst of the worst day of her life, there was something oddly sweet about this rough cowboy admitting he had noticed her, had wanted to meet her. "Thank you," she said finally, "for everything." Benjamin nodded and headed for the door. "Get some rest. I will be right outside if you need anything." After he left, Victoria sat on the edge of the narrow bed, trying to process everything that had happened. This morning she had been at home, expecting nothing more unusual than another hot summer day. Now she was hiding in a canyon with a stranger, with no home to return to and no idea what came next. It should have been terrifying. It was terrifying. But there was also something else, something she could not quite name. Hope, maybe. Or the first stirrings of something that might eventually become hope. She lay down on the bed, fully clothed, and closed her eyes. The pillow smelled like sage and something else, something masculine and not unpleasant. She thought she would be too keyed up to sleep, but exhaustion pulled her under within minutes. When she woke, the light had changed. The sun was lower in the sky, suggesting late afternoon. Victoria sat up slowly, wincing at the soreness in her feet and the stiffness in her muscles. She could hear movement outside, and when she looked out the window, she saw Benjamin working with his horse, brushing the mare's coat with long, steady strokes. Victoria stood carefully and made her way to the door. Her feet hurt, but the pain was manageable. Benjamin looked up as she emerged onto the porch. "You are awake," he said, stating the obvious. "How are you feeling?" "Better," Victoria said, and it was true. The rest had helped and her mind felt clearer. "What time is it?" "About 4 in the afternoon. You slept for almost 6 hours." 6 hours. Victoria could hardly believe it. "I am sorry. You probably had things you needed to do." "Nothing that could not wait," Benjamin said. He finished with the horse and walked over to the porch. "I have been thinking about what to do, about getting word to your father." "How?" Victoria asked. I cannot exactly go back to town and send a telegram. No, but I can, Benjamin said. I will ride into the next town over, Daggett, and send the telegram from there. It is about 20 miles, so I will leave at first light and be back by afternoon. You would do that? Victoria asked. Of course, Benjamin said, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Your father needs to know you are safe. Can you write out what you want to say? Victoria nodded. Benjamin found a stub of a pencil and a scrap of paper, and Victoria carefully composed a message. It took several tries to get it right, to explain what had happened without going into too much detail. Finally, she settled on something simple. False rumors. Town turned against me. Safe now with friend. Will explain everything when you return. Please do not come to Calico. We'll find you instead. Love, Victoria. She handed the paper to Benjamin, who read it over and nodded. This should work. I will send it first thing in the morning. Thank you, Victoria said. I know I keep saying that, but I mean it. I know you do, Benjamin said. His eyes met hers, and Victoria felt that flutter in her chest again. This man, this stranger, had risked everything to help her. He had no reason to care what happened to her, but he did anyway. They spent the evening in easy conversation. Benjamin told her about his work on the cattle ranch, about the owner, a fair-minded man named Jackson who had given him a chance when no one else would. Victoria told him about her life in Calico, about her father's freight business, about her mother who had died when Victoria was 12. She would have liked you, Victoria found herself saying. My mother. She always said you could tell a person's character by how they treated those who could not help them. Sounds like she was a wise woman, Benjamin said. As darkness fell, Benjamin insisted on sleeping outside again despite Victoria's protests. She lay in the narrow bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything that had happened. She should have been devastated, should have been planning her revenge or wallowing in self-pity. Instead, she found herself thinking about Benjamin Rourke, about the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, about the gentleness in his calloused hands. It was ridiculous, she told herself. She had known him for less than a day. She was in the middle of a crisis. This was not the time to be developing feelings for someone. But her heart did not seem to care about logic. Benjamin left before dawn the next morning, as promised. Victoria watched him ride out, feeling unaccountably anxious about him leaving. He had left her with food and water, had made sure she had everything she needed, but the cabin felt empty without his presence. She spent the day trying to keep busy. She cleaned the already clean cabin, organized Benjamin's few belongings, and tried not to think about what was happening in Calico. Were people still talking about her? Had they ransacked her father's house? The not knowing was almost worse than being there. The sun was beginning its descent when she heard hoofbeats. Victoria's heart leaped into her throat. Benjamin had said he would be back by afternoon, but what if something had gone wrong? What if someone from Calico had followed him? What if it was not Benjamin at all? But when she peered cautiously out the window, she saw the familiar bay mare and her rider. Relief washed over her so powerfully that her knees went weak. Benjamin dismounted and walked to the cabin, and Victoria met him at the door. "How did it go?" she asked. "Telegram is sent," Benjamin said. "Should reach your father in Sacramento within a day or two." He paused, his expression troubled. "There is something else, though. I heard some talk in Daggett. Apparently, word has spread about what happened in Calico." Victoria's stomach dropped. "What kind of talk?" "Nothing good," Benjamin admitted. "The story has gotten twisted around. Some folks are saying you tried to break up a marriage, others are saying worse things." "I am sorry, Victoria." She closed her eyes, fighting back tears. She had hoped that once she was away from Calico, the rumors would die down. Instead, they were spreading like wildfire. "Hey," Benjamin said softly. He stepped closer, and Victoria felt his hand on her shoulder. "Look at me." She opened her eyes and found him watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Those people do not know you," he said. "They do not know what kind of person you are. Their opinions do not matter." "But they do matter," Victoria said miserably. "Because now every town in this region is going to hear these stories. How am I supposed to start over when everyone already thinks they know who I am?" "Then we go somewhere no one has heard of you," Benjamin said. "Somewhere far enough away that the rumors will not follow." "We," Victoria repeated. Benjamin looked uncomfortable for the first time since she had met him. "I mean, if you want. I am not trying to presume anything. I just thought, if you needed help getting settled somewhere new, I could go with you. Make sure you are safe." There was something in his eyes, something vulnerable and hopeful. Victoria realized with a start that he wanted to go with her. Not out of obligation or pity, but because he wanted to be with her. "You barely know me," she whispered. "I know enough," Benjamin said. "I know you are brave. I know you are kind. I saw how you thanked me even when you were terrified and hurt. I saw how you did not want to take my bed even though you were exhausted." He took a breath. "And I know that I want to know more, if you will let me." Victoria's heart was pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. This was crazy. This was impulsive and reckless, and everything she had been taught proper young women should not do. But when had being proper ever gotten her anything except branded as a homewrecker and chased from her home? "Yes," she said. "Yes, I want that too." The smile that broke across Benjamin's face was like the sun coming out from behind clouds. He reached out and gently cupped her cheek with one hand, his thumb brushing away a tear she had not realized she had shed. "We will figure this out," he said. "Together." That night, they sat on the porch and made plans. Benjamin knew of a place in Arizona Territory, a small town called Prescott where a friend of his had settled. It was far enough from California that the rumors would not reach, and it was growing quickly, which meant opportunities for work. "What about your job here?" Victoria asked. "Your boss, Jackson, the one you said gave you a chance." "I will explain the situation to him," Benjamin said. "He is a good man. He will understand." He looked at her seriously. "But I want to be clear about something. I am not doing this because I feel sorry for you or because I think you owe me anything. I am doing this because I want to." "I want to as well," Victoria said softly, "which is strange considering we just met." "Sometimes you just know," Benjamin said. "My parents, they met on a wagon train heading west. My father proposed after knowing her for 2 weeks, and they were married for 30 years before fever took them." His voice was wistful. "He used to say that when you found the right person, everything else just fell into place." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. Victoria felt a sense of peace she had not experienced since the rumors started. Yes, her life had been turned upside down. Yes, she was facing an uncertain future, but she was not alone. Over the next few days, they prepared for the journey to Arizona. Benjamin rode back to his employer's ranch to give notice and collect his pay. He returned with supplies, a second horse, and the news that Jackson had been understanding and had even given Benjamin a bonus and a letter of recommendation. He said, "If things do not work out in Arizona, I always have a job here," Benjamin reported. "He also said to tell you that anyone who judges without knowing all the facts is a fool." Victoria felt tears prick her eyes. She had never met Jackson, but his kindness through Benjamin meant more than she could express. They received a telegram response from Victoria's father on the 5th day. He was brief but supportive, saying he would meet them in Prescott in 2 months, after he settled his affairs in California. He also confirmed that he would not be returning to Calico and was selling the freight business to a buyer in Sacramento. He believes me, Victoria said, reading the telegram for the third time. He did not even question my story. Of course he believes you, Benjamin said. He is your father. He knows who you are. The reality of what was happening began to sink in. Victoria was leaving California, the only place she had ever known. She was traveling to a new territory with a man she had known for less than a week. It should have been terrifying. Instead, it felt like the beginning of something wonderful. They left the canyon hideaway on a cool morning in late July. Benjamin had planned their route carefully, avoiding main roads and larger towns where someone might recognize Victoria. They traveled mostly in the early morning and evening, resting during the hottest parts of the day. The journey took nearly 3 weeks. They crossed deserts and mountains, following trails that Benjamin seemed to know by instinct. At night, they camped under the stars, and Benjamin taught Victoria how to build a proper fire, how to read the stars for navigation, how to listen to the sounds of the desert. "You are a good teacher," Victoria said one evening as she successfully started a fire on her first try. "You are a good student," Benjamin replied. He was sitting across from her, mending a tear in his saddlebag. "Most people from towns do not take to trail life this easily." "I suppose I am discovering things about myself I did not know," Victoria said. She looked up at the vast expanse of stars above them. "Part of me is angry about what happened in Calico, but another part is grateful in a strange way. If those rumors had not started, I would still be there, living the same life I always had. I would never have met you." Benjamin set down his mending and moved to sit beside her. "I have been thinking the same thing," he admitted. "I wish you had not been hurt. I wish those people had been kinder. But I cannot bring myself to regret how things turned out because it brought you into my life." He took her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. It was not the first time they had held hands during the journey, but tonight it felt different, more significant somehow. "Victoria," Benjamin said, his voice serious. "I know we have not known each other long. I know this is all happening fast. But I need you to know that my intentions are honorable. When we get to Prescott, if you want to wait for your father before we make any decisions about the future, I will understand." Victoria turned to look at him, seeing the earnestness in his face. "What kind of decisions are you talking about?" Benjamin took a deep breath. "The kind where I ask your father for permission to court you properly. The kind where, eventually, if you are willing, I ask you to be my wife." Victoria's breath caught. "You want to marry me?" "I know it sounds crazy," Benjamin said quickly. "And I am not asking right now. I just want you to know where my head is at, what I am hoping for. But there is no pressure. If you just want to be friends, if you need time, I understand." Victoria thought about everything they had been through together in such a short time. She thought about how safe she felt with him, how easy their conversations were, how right it felt to wake up each morning and see his face. She thought about the way he had risked everything to help a stranger, the way he treated her with respect and kindness, the way he made her laugh even in difficult moments. "I do not think it sounds crazy," she said quietly. "I think it sounds wonderful." The smile that lit Benjamin's face was worth everything she had been through. He leaned in slowly, giving her plenty of time to pull away, and pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead. "We are going to have a good life together," he said. "I promise you that." They reached Prescott in the third week of August. The town was nestled in the mountains, surrounded by tall pines and clear air that was a welcome relief from the desert heat. It was larger than Calico, more prosperous, with wide streets and substantial buildings. Benjamin's friend, a man named Thomas Keating who ran a lumber mill, welcomed them warmly. He had a kind, weathered face and a booming laugh that made Victoria instantly comfortable. "Any friend of Ben's is a friend of mine," Thomas said, shaking Victoria's hand enthusiastically. And Ben, you old dog, you did not mention in your letter that you were bringing such a lovely companion. It is a recent development, Benjamin said, grinning. Thomas set them up in a small house on the edge of his property. It was simple but clean, with 2 bedrooms and a functional kitchen. You can stay here as long as you need, Thomas said. Ben, I've got work for you at the mill if you want it. The pay is decent. I would appreciate that, Benjamin said. Over the next few weeks, they settled into a routine. Benjamin worked at the lumber mill during the day, and Victoria found work helping the local school teacher with her younger students. The town was welcoming, and no one asked too many questions about where they had come from or why. In the evenings, Benjamin and Victoria would sit on the porch of their little house and talk. Sometimes they would walk through the pine forests or ride out to the nearby creek. Benjamin was courting her properly now, with careful attention to propriety. They were not married, after all, and even though they were living in the same house, Benjamin made sure there could be no hint of impropriety. He slept in one bedroom, Victoria in the other, and he never entered her room without knocking first. You know people are going to talk anyway, Victoria said one evening. We are living together, unmarried. That is enough to start rumors. Let them talk, Benjamin said. I know the truth and you know the truth. Besides, your father will be here soon. We can get married proper then if you still want to. If I still want to, Victoria repeated, raising an eyebrow. Are you having second thoughts? Never, Benjamin said firmly. He pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her waist. They were standing by the creek, watching the water flow over smooth stones. I have never been more sure of anything in my life. He kissed her then, really kissed her, and Victoria felt her whole body respond. It was not their first kiss, but it was the first one that felt like a promise, like a glimpse of their future together. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathless. I love you, Benjamin said, the words tumbling out as if he could not hold them back anymore. I know it is fast. I know we should probably wait longer before saying things like that, but I do. I love you, Victoria Zimmerman. Victoria felt tears gathering in her eyes, but they were happy tears this time. I love you too, she whispered. I think I have loved you since you pulled me onto your horse and saved my life. They stood there for a long time, holding each other as the sun set behind the mountains. Victoria thought about how different her life was now compared to just 2 months ago. Everything she had known was gone, but somehow she had gained so much more. She had found love, real love, with a man who saw her for who she truly was. Victoria's father arrived in Prescott in late September, looking older and more tired than Victoria remembered. But when he saw her, his face lit up with joy and relief. My girl, he said, pulling her into a fierce hug. I was so worried. I am fine, Papa, Victoria assured him. Better than fine, actually. Her father pulled back and looked her over carefully. You look happy, he said, sounding surprised. I am happy, Victoria said. She glanced at Benjamin, who was standing a respectful distance away. Papa, there is someone I want you to meet. The introduction went better than Victoria had dared hope. Her father and Benjamin took to each other immediately, bonding over shared experiences and similar values. That evening, over dinner at the small house, Benjamin formally asked for permission to marry Victoria. I know we have not known each other long, sir, Benjamin said. But I love your daughter, and I swear to you that I will spend the rest of my life making her happy and keeping her safe. Victoria's father studied Benjamin for a long moment, then looked at Victoria. Is this what you want? More than anything, Victoria said. Her father smiled, and it was the first genuine smile Victoria had seen from him in months. Then you have my blessing, he said. He shook Benjamin's hand. Take care of her. She is all I have. I will, sir, Benjamin promised. I swear it. They were married a week later in a simple ceremony at the local church. Thomas Keating stood as Benjamin's best man, and the school teacher, a kind woman named Margaret who had become Victoria's friend, stood with her. Victoria's father walked her down the aisle, his eyes suspiciously bright. Victoria wore a simple blue dress that Margaret had helped her make. It was not the elaborate wedding gown she had once imagined, but she thought she had never looked more beautiful. Benjamin wore his best clothes, his hair neatly trimmed, his eyes never leaving Victoria's face. "I, Benjamin Rourke, take you, Victoria Zimmerman, to be my lawfully wedded wife," Benjamin said, his voice steady and sure. "I promise to love you, honor you, and cherish you for as long as we both shall live." Victoria repeated her own vows, her voice thick with emotion. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Benjamin kissed her with such tenderness that Victoria felt her heart might burst from happiness. The reception was small but joyful. Thomas had arranged for food and music, and the small community that had welcomed them turned out to celebrate. Victoria danced with her new husband, then with her father, then with Thomas and several other townsmen who wanted to congratulate the bride. "You look radiant," her father said as they danced. "I have not seen you this happy since your mother was alive." "I am happy, Papa," Victoria said. "Truly happy." "This Benjamin," her father said, "he is a good man. I can see it in how he looks at you, how he treats you. Your mother would have approved." That night, Victoria and Benjamin went home as husband and wife. Benjamin carried her over the threshold, both of them laughing at the tradition. Inside, with the door closed and the world shut out, they finally allowed themselves to be completely alone together. "Hello, Mrs. Rourke," Benjamin said, pulling her close. "Hello, husband," Victoria replied, loving the way the word felt on her tongue. They made love slowly, tenderly, learning each other's bodies and hearts. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the darkness, talking quietly about their future. "I want to build us a real house," Benjamin said. "Something bigger than this, with room for children someday." "Children?" Victoria asked, smiling. "If you want them," Benjamin said. "I have always wanted to be a father, but only if you want to be a mother." "I do," Victoria said. "I think you will be a wonderful father." They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, safe and loved and home. Life in Prescott settled into a comfortable rhythm. Benjamin continued working at the lumber mill, but he was also learning the lumber business from Thomas. Victoria's father, who had decided to stay in Prescott rather than returning to California, started a small freight operation serving the mining communities in the surrounding mountains. Benjamin helped with that as well, and gradually the two businesses became interconnected. Victoria continued teaching, though she had to stop when she discovered she was pregnant in the spring of 1886. The baby, a boy they named William Jacob Rourke, was born in November during an early snowstorm. Benjamin was terrified during the birth, pacing outside the bedroom like a caged animal, but when he finally held his son, Victoria saw tears streaming down his face. "He is perfect," Benjamin whispered, touching the baby's tiny hand with one calloused finger. "You are perfect." Victoria had never seen him look so vulnerable, so full of wonder. "We made him," she said softly. "You and me." Being a mother was harder than Victoria had anticipated, but also more rewarding. She loved watching William grow, loved seeing Benjamin's patience with their son. Her father doted on his grandson, spending hours telling him stories even though the baby was too young to understand. When William was 2, Victoria became pregnant again. This time, they had a daughter whom they named Sarah Rose. She had Victoria's dark hair and Benjamin's brown eyes, and she was the most beautiful baby Victoria had ever seen. "Our family is complete," Benjamin said, holding Sarah while William clung to his leg. Is it? Victoria teased. Only 2 children. Well, maybe not complete, Benjamin admitted, grinning. But this is a good start. As the years passed, the small house gave way to the larger one Benjamin had promised. He built it himself with help from Thomas and some of the other men from town. It had 4 bedrooms, a proper kitchen, and a wide front porch where they could sit and watch their children play. Victoria's father lived with them, his health gradually declining as he aged. He died peacefully in his sleep in 1892, surrounded by his family. Victoria grieved for him, but she was grateful he had lived to see her happy, to know his grandchildren. The rumors from Calico had never followed them to Prescott. Occasionally, someone new would arrive in town from California, but by then the story had faded, replaced by newer, more interesting gossip. Victoria was known in Prescott simply as Mrs. Rourke, the schoolteacher's wife, Benjamin's devoted partner. They had 2 more children, both boys, named Henry and James. The house was always full of noise and laughter, of scraped knees and bedtime stories, of family dinners and Sunday church services. Benjamin's lumber business thrived, eventually growing large enough that he could hire workers and spend more time at home. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Benjamin surprised Victoria with a trip to the creek, where he had first told her he loved her. They left the children with Thomas and his wife for the evening and rode out together, just the 2 of them. "You ever regret how we met?" Benjamin asked as they sat by the water, watching the sun set. "Do you ever wish things had happened differently?" Victoria thought about the question seriously. "I regret that people were cruel," she said. "I regret that I was hurt and scared. But do I regret meeting you? Do I regret the life we have built together? Never, not for a single moment." "Good," Benjamin said. He pulled her close, kissing her temple. "Because I would do it all over again, every bit of it, if it meant ending up here with you." They made love that evening under the stars, in the same spot where they had shared their first real kiss. It was different from those early, tentative touches. This was the love of 2 people who had built a life together, who had weathered storms and celebrated triumphs, who knew each other's bodies and hearts as well as their own. As they rode back home in the darkness, Victoria reflected on how much had changed since that terrible morning in Calico. She had lost her home, her reputation, everything she thought she knew about herself. But in losing all of that, she had found something infinitely more valuable. She had found love, real and true and lasting. She had found a partner who saw her clearly and loved her anyway. She had found a family, a home, a purpose. The years continued to pass in a blur of joy and occasional sorrow. William grew into a serious, thoughtful young man who wanted to study law. Sarah was spirited and independent, with a talent for drawing. Henry and James were inseparable, always getting into some kind of mischief. Victoria returned to teaching once the children were older, and she became known as one of the best educators in the territory. Benjamin's business continued to grow. He was respected in the community, known for his fairness and integrity. People came to him for advice, for help settling disputes, for loans when times were hard. He never forgot what it felt like to be judged unfairly, and he made sure he treated everyone with dignity and respect. On a warm summer evening in 1905, Benjamin and Victoria sat on their front porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. Their children were grown now, scattered across the territory but all doing well. William was practicing law in Phoenix. Sarah had married a local rancher and had 2 children of her own. Henry and James were running the lumber business together, arguing constantly but deeply devoted to each other. 20 years, Victoria said, marveling at how quickly time had passed. 20 years since we got married. Best 20 years of my life, Benjamin said. He reached over and took her hand, his grip still strong despite the gray in his hair and the lines around his eyes. "I meant what I said that day at the creek, you know. I would do it all over again." "So would I," Victoria said. She squeezed his hand, feeling the familiar calluses, the strength in his fingers. "You saved my life, Benjamin Rourke. Not just that day in the desert, but every day since." "You saved mine, too," Benjamin said softly. "You gave me a reason to wake up every morning, a purpose beyond just surviving. You gave me a family, a home, a life worth living." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge one by one. Victoria thought about the young woman she had been, running terrified through the desert with nothing but the clothes on her back. She thought about the cowboy who had appeared out of nowhere, offering salvation without expecting anything in return. She thought about all the moments between then and now, the struggles and triumphs, the ordinary days and extraordinary ones. "I love you," she said, as she had said 1,000 times before and would say 1,000 times more. "I love you too," Benjamin replied, as constant as the sunrise. Inside the house, the clock chimed 9. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new joys, new moments to treasure. But tonight, Victoria was content to sit here with her husband, grateful for the life they had built from the ashes of her old one. She had been driven from her town by rumors and hatred, but that dark beginning had led her to a love more powerful than anything she had ever imagined. The wind rustled through the pine trees, carrying the scent of sage and earth. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called to the moon. Victoria leaned her head on Benjamin's shoulder, feeling the steady rhythm of his breathing, the warmth of his body next to hers. This was home. Not the house, not the town, but this man, this life, this love they had created together. Years later, when Victoria was an old woman with silver in her hair and grandchildren playing at her feet, people would sometimes ask her about her life, about how she had met her husband. She would smile and say simply, "He found me when I was lost, and he brought me home." It was the truth, though not the whole truth. The whole truth was more complicated, more painful, more beautiful than any simple explanation could capture. It was a story of cruelty and kindness, of loss and discovery, of a love that had grown from the smallest seed into something magnificent and enduring. Victoria lived to be 78 years old, surrounded by children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. Benjamin passed away just 6 months before her, and everyone said it was as if a part of her had gone with him. She became quieter in those final months, spending long hours sitting on the porch they had shared for so many years, staring out at the mountains as if she could see beyond them to whatever came next. On a cool October morning, Victoria Rourke died peacefully in her sleep. Her children found her in her bed, a slight smile on her face, her hand stretched out across the empty place where Benjamin used to sleep. In her other hand, she clutched an old, faded letter, the one Benjamin had written to her on their first anniversary, telling her all the ways he loved her, all the reasons he was grateful fate had brought them together. They buried her next to Benjamin in the Prescott Cemetery, on a hill overlooking the town they had called home for more than 50 years. The entire community turned out for her funeral. Former students, now middle-aged or older, spoke about how she had changed their lives. Business partners talked about Benjamin and Victoria's generosity and integrity. Friends and family shared stories that made people laugh and cry, but the most poignant tribute came from their grandson, William's oldest son, who had been named Benjamin in honor of his grandfather. He stood at the grave site and read from the letter Victoria had been holding when she died. "My dearest Victoria," the letter began. "On this, our first year of marriage, I want you to know that you are the best thing that ever happened to me. You took a chance on a cowboy with nothing to offer but his heart, and you have made me the richest man alive. Every morning I wake up grateful that I happened to be riding past Calico on that terrible day. Every night I go to sleep thanking God that you said yes. I promise to love you forever, in this life and whatever comes after. Yours always, Benjamin. There was not a dry eye in the crowd. The younger Benjamin folded the letter carefully and placed it on his grandmother's casket. They found each other when they were both lost, he said. And they built a love that lasted a lifetime. We should all be so lucky. The story of Victoria Zimmerman and Benjamin Rourke became part of Prescott's history, passed down through generations. It was told to grandchildren as a bedtime story, recounted in history classes as an example of early Arizona Territory life, remembered at family gatherings as a reminder of where they all came from. But more than that, it became a story about the power of kindness in the face of cruelty, about the possibility of finding hope in the darkest moments, about the kind of love that transforms two separate lives into one shared journey. It was a reminder that sometimes the worst day of your life can lead to the best days, that sometimes losing everything means you are free to find what you were truly meant to have. The little house where they had first lived in Prescott still stood for many years after their deaths, eventually becoming a museum dedicated to early territorial life. Visitors would walk through the rooms, seeing the simple furniture, the old photographs, the everyday objects that told the story of a family's life. And always, displayed prominently in the main room, was that anniversary letter, carefully preserved behind glass, a testament to a love that had started in the most unlikely way and had endured through every challenge life could throw at it. In the museum's guest book, visitors would often write comments. "This story gives me hope," one person wrote. "It reminds me that good people still exist," another added. "I want a love like this," wrote a young woman in careful script. The story of the cowboy who took her somewhere no one knew, who gave her not just safety but a whole new life, lived on long after both of them were gone. It lived on in their descendants, who carried their names and their values forward into new generations. It lived on in the town they had helped build, in the school where Victoria had taught, in the lumber business that still bore Benjamin's name decades after his death. But most of all, it lived on as a reminder that sometimes when everything falls apart, when your whole world turns against you, when you are running through the desert with no shoes and no hope, salvation can come from the most unexpected places. Sometimes it comes in the form of a cowboy on a bay mare, with kind eyes and a good heart, who sees you not for what others say you are, but for who you truly are. And sometimes, if you are very lucky, that salvation comes with a love so deep and true that it lasts not just a lifetime, but forever, echoing down through the years like a promise kept, like a story that never really ends because it lives on in every heart that hears it and believes in the possibility of finding love when you least expect it, in the most unlikely circumstances, with a person who appears just when you need them most. That was the real legacy of Victoria and Benjamin Rourke. Not the businesses they built or the children they raised, important as those were. Their real legacy was the proof that love can triumph over cruelty, that kindness can change everything, that sometimes the darkest night really does come right before the dawn. They had taken the worst that life could offer and transformed it into something beautiful. They had turned a story that started with hatred and fear into one that ended with love and hope. And in the end, that was everything.